Hello and welcome back to the El Diablo tutorial series. I'm Michael and this is part 8. Today we will create something called anime montages and we will create a combat system. Now let's jump right in. Go to our tutorial car 1 folder, then to our animations folder, then to our sword animations folder, and we will basically end up with our 3 animations we imported in an earlier part. Select each of them, right click, go to create, and then click on create anime montage. This will create 3 light purple colored montages, and we will open the last one, the Neri Sword /3 anime montage. So double click on it and it will play back our current animation. Now we have a lot of options in our animation editor. And just a little tip. This animation editor is called Persona. So if you run into problems with our lovely animation editor in Unreal, just type in Persona and then, well, your problem. So it might be easier to find a solution for it. Okay, we have a different selection of options here. And what is basically a montage all about? Well, a montage works like a container of some sorts. And you can put a lot of different animations in them. We won't do it, but that's what a montage can do. And if you just call it at some point, all your animations inside the montage will be played. So it's a very neat feature. The next thing is we have the default group, default slot option here. I will delete these first. These are just as a placeholder. Well, this default group, default slot will always be selected when you create a montage. So every time you need to check if you have the right slot already in it, because Unreal will always go back to its default option called default group, default slot, on the first time when we create any kind of montage. So keep that in mind. For the sake of being for giving you a little bit more to toy with, we will create our own slot. So click on this magnifying glass and it will open up something called an anime slot manager. We will have our group, our slot, but because we want to have our own group and slot, we will click on add group, type in fighting, and under fighting we will create a slot called fighting slot. So some of you might wonder, why didn't I name it the same? Because group and slot actually are not 2 different objects or 2 different types. If you would put in here something called fighting, like up here, it will just not be created. It has to say basically the same namespace as group, so it can't be used. So keep that in mind. Just add slot after your name and it will all be fine. Now we will click on the default group, default slot, and we will select our newly created fighting slot. You have to do this with your other montages. So click on the asset browser here, then double click on the second one and change it to fighting slot, save it, and do the same with the first one. Now we have them all on the right slot. So if you sometime if you at some point don't get any animation if you use your attack, always double check if you have the right slot selected. I did this error multiple times because I'm a moron. Don't be stupid like me and be smart. Okay. The next thing we want to look at is on the left panel here. We have our animation tab, and under the animation tab we have preview pose asset. Basically you can specify a pose instead of having an animation running. You can also change the rate scale, and the rate scale is kind of like animation speed, just that the speed is being applied to the montage itself and not to the animations. So that's a pretty handy feature if you want to speed up your montage and the animations in your montage. Under this animation tab is the blend option tab. And the blend option is quite a handy feature too, because I will go now to the animation blueprint. You don't need to. And we created in the earlier parts our motion state machine, which has basically our blend space in it, and the blend space controls our idle to walking transition. But basically this state machine, we call it motion, is it's our backbone of our animation and of our default animation system. So this state machine will normally drive our animation logic. But if we play a montage, our state machine will slowly and progressively give up control and give it to our montage. So at some point we will have reached the maximum blending time, and the montage will take completely over and you will only just see the montage animation and not getting any influence of the state machine whatsoever. The same happens when we blend out. It will slowly give back control to the state machine, and the influence on the montage will get less and less. So until our state machine completely takes over and we have our default animation system running again. Very cool. So now we have on the blend in some options, and we have the same options on the blend out option here. The first one is blend option, and we have selected linear. This is kind of a slope type curve. And when we select cubic, we will basically get a Z shape or a slightly slanted S shape or a half sinus shape of a curve, which will basically ease in and ease out our animation, or our animation blending between the state machine and the montage. So these curves are basically responsible for how your animation and your state machine interpolate between each other. So there are a lot of options, and you should try it out for yourself, what you think is best and works best and such. And yeah, that's just what blend option does. You can specify a shape of a curve, and this curve will basically control how we transition from this state machine to this montage. Okay, we can also specify a custom curve. So if you want to use a custom curve of some sort, you can put it in here. Then we have the blend time. And there's a difference between the blend time here and the blend time here. It works the same, but they are calculated differently. So if we have a blend time in our blend in time of 0.25, we will actually be on frame 25, where the montage takes full control over our animations. So what is this 0.25 actually referencing to? Well, you have here this timeline, but the animation editor just knows the value between 0 and 1. 0 means 0%, 1 means 100%. Now, when we use the 0.25 value, we will basically use 25% of this time frame here. So we will end up on frame 25. If we would put in 0.33, we will end up on the frame 33 or 33%. So if you want to have a very simple way of calculating where it actually blends in, you just add you just look at the last two digits and just search it on the frame range or on the percent, which you can see here when you drag it. Now we will add on the blend in option, so we will always add frames towards here, so we count from 0 to 25 or whatever you typed in here. In the blend out time, we will actually subtract frames from this side towards this side. So we still have 0.25% or 25% or 25 frames in it. So instead of adding it on this axis, we will subtract 25 frames from this axis. So we will end up on 75%. If we would type in 0.4, we will subtract 40 frames or 40% of our frame range. So we will end up on frame 60. That's basically the difference between the blend time in the blend in option and the blend time in the blend out option. Okay. We will close it. And now we will go into our motion in our state machine, basically by going into our tutorial car 1 folder, animations folder, and then double click on the tutorial car anim BP. We need naturally to be in the anime graph, and we are already in it. And we will put a slot between here. So right click, type in slot, and we will select the slot, default slot on the montage section here. This will create something called a slot, default slot, and it basically also reverts to our default Unreal editor group, like default group, default slot. But because we created a new slot, we will click up here on the slot name, select fighting slot, and then connect them with each other. Motion with the source, and this with the result. What this slot now basically does is that if your state machine, it runs all the time, your state machine. It passes on its animation data to the slot, And if you don't have any montage playing right now, it will just pass through the signal. It will not apply anything or change anything to the state machine. But if you have the state machine running and you have a montage playing right now, the slot will basically apply and override bit by bit the state machine and give the end result to the final animation pose. So it works kind of a modification device. That's pretty neat and pretty cool as a future. Because this is a two-parter, I will see you in the next one in a moment. So see you in the next one.